think about chapter 4?
I liked it. As I was reading it again for like the 12th time, it sparked a lot more thoughts in my head, especially speaking with people who were reading it for the first time, people who hadn't even heard of it. You start to have all these kind of thoughts about how we can be like these Methuselah dogs, and what did they do years ago? What was life like before processed food came along? It talks about how we as humans, as hunter-gatherers, had to go find our food. Dogs were the same way, they had to go find their food. They didn't eat at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. every single day. We forget that because we live in such a modern society now. It's like we get up, you feed the dog, you get ready for work, you go to work, you come home by about 6 o'clock that time. By the time you get home, the dog's hungry, you feed the dog, and you just end up on like the 6 a.m., 6 p.m. schedule. And dogs, they'll adapt to it, but they weren't geared for that, evolutionarily. They were geared for hunting and gathering and going a couple days without food. They had to go find it and, or find scraps left over from another, animal interaction and feast on what was left. They didn't always eat. Breakfast isn't served on a platter in the forest, or even back when there was village dogs, thousands and thousands of years ago. So it goes into all that, which I liked having a little bit of the history of. Is it's like, okay, what did these long-lived dogs do? What was their life kind of like? That part I liked, but I'm sure we'll get into more of it. There's a ton of good tidbits in this, but I like how it started off with how what the ancestors did and how often they ate, how they had to move around to find it. It involved a lot of activity. You have these little dogs, people who have like the Yorkies or the Chihuahuas, or they're tiny. They're not going to go hunting around for food. Their landscape might be your apartment, and then their food, their breakfast and lunch and dinner gets served on a platter for them, and they're not going on the hunt in the trek, trying to find their meal. And it does go into fasting and how important that is a little bit, or how it's okay. I think we touched on fasting in some of the other chapters, but it's quite all right. It's quite evolutionarily. That's a big word. Evolutionarily, okay for them to not eat for several hours. It's okay and it'll work. But yeah, reading it again, I had a lot more thoughts about conversations I had with people over the last week of, explaining to them why, because they would ask me, they're like, why is this book so good? I'm just like, that's going to take me several hours to explain, but I'll try and condense it the best I can. I was like, it goes in and busts a lot of these myths and everything, and the things that you can do to make them better. How there's another good part I remember reading about how it's such a big billion-dollar industry. Processed pet food is such a big billion-dollar industry, and most people aren't aware. There's only I think it was 5 companies that own that dominate everything.
Yep.
And it's crazy. I want to say it was 86 billion sticks out to me for some reason. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize who owns who. I remember having conversations about that as well. You might not like this one particular brand, but then you don't realize that Mars owns it. You don't realize that Colgate-Palmolive owns it. You don't realize that Nestle owns it. You're just like, oh, I'm going to boycott this brand because it did this, but you go switch to another one. And, how many companies does Mars own? How many companies does Nestle own? People don't realize that either. So it breaks down that too. I like how it divulges it almost feels like insider secrets a little bit that the pet food companies, they don't want you to know about. They don't want the average pet parent to know about, but it's just this is what happens. This is what goes on behind the scenes that we're just not really told when you walk into the pet store, because the average pet store retailer doesn't have time and the hours to explain who owns who under what company's, umbrella, and how big the industry is and all that. So there's tons of good things. What did you find that stuck out to you?
I think the one thing which is a real hurdle for most pet parents, especially first timer, is that your dog doesn't have to eat every day. and your dog doesn't have to eat multiple meals every day. And it's a real mind-bending shock to a lot of pet parents because they tend to, like, oh, okay, um, we eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we have a fixed time, so our dog should eat that way because we think it's normal, again, with the science that's coming out of this book that tell you that actually humans don't even have to have 3 meals a day. Hello, you know, um, again, a shocker. But it really is because for me, when I talk to potential adopters for dogs, they get very worried that they're going to kill the dog, or they get upset if like, oh, the dog's not eating. Do I have to bring it to the vet? They're like straight away, there's something wrong with my dog. And I'm like, actually, the dog might be just auto fasting, choosing not to eat. That's actually a good thing, so long as you don't see like the vomiting or diarrhea or whatever. But if it's doing as per normal, it's just doesn't want to eat, it's okay. And that one is a big mind-bending trip for a lot. I mean, like every single pet parent I know the first time, even for myself when I was learning, I was just like, whoa, really? Like, can I do that? Am I gonna kill my dog? My dog looks so sad, you
Yeah,
know?
it's scary. It's scary when you experience it, you know?
Mm,
It's a lot. You're just like, because, for us, we know that we don't eat when we don't feel good. So you
mm,
automatically assume your pet doesn't feel good.
yeah.
Because for us, like we're wired to, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We want those sweets, or we want that sandwich, or we want that, big dinner at the end of the day. And like, I got over a sinus infection just 2 weeks ago. I was like, I was not hungry. You're not hungry, you don't want anything, or you don't want as much. And we know that when we get sick or have the flu or what have you, we're just like, So we just assume that our dogs and our animals, because it usually is one of the first signs if they don't feel good, they're just like, I don't want any food. So it's hard, it can be very hard to differentiate, do they not feel good or is it okay? And that comes with just practice and life and learning.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, that was like the first thing that jumped up because like that is the number one obstacle for a lot of pet parents when you're trying to like, tell them like actually, once a day is actually quite good and you don't have to feed every day, and they're very horrified, that you're being very cruel, to the animal. The other thing again, which they re-emphasize in this book is, to eat better, eat less, and eat much less often. You know, that is a mantra that they sort of like emphasize throughout the book. The very basic thing, that they talk about, and I love how they use the story of Bluey and Maggie, the two Methuselah dogs, in the beginning of the chapter. So I think it's relatable for a lot of new for pet parents who are new to this idea of what's a healthy dog for old age, is it possible, because they think, I mean, like, hey, most people I know, when they see my dog, she doesn't look her age. She's 10 years old this year, she's still, kind of like a crazy little hyperactive little dog. um, but for a lot of people, they think when you're 10, you are really, really old. And there's a certain look for a dog at 10. Mobility, the white gray, the white hair, the low energy, maybe dementia kind of thing, going on. So a lot of people, when they look at the medium-sized dogs, it's like, oh, 10 years old, like golden retrievers, you know, 10. For most people now, when they talk about a modern day Labrador and Golden Retriever, 10 is like, it's like the clock is ticking very fast, and like, yeah, so they think like, oh, if it hits 16, 17, that's like, wow. But now in this book, they say Methuselah is like, 20, 22 and
Mm-hmm.
above. That's a
Yeah.
Methuselah, and it's like, can my dog really live that long? you know. So what I like about the beginning of this book is that it reinforces and uses examples, with these two dogs. Like, why is it they live so long? You know, what was it? And when you think about it, like low stress, lots of running around, eating like, yeah, basically, raw food, on the farm. They were working dogs. They were,
Yeah.
it's not your typical, say, urban dog, domestic dog now, pet dog.
Yeah.
Um, so it gives you an idea of like what is possible, and like where are you compared to that, and like how can we get there, just like you were saying, like you read the book the first time and you sort of like, where am I in terms of achieving those goals, and how can I switch my lifestyle, adjust my lifestyle to incorporate that ideal lifestyle for my dog as well into my life.
Yeah.
Because it's really asking the pet parent to think very hard. Are you willing to change to improve the quality of your dog's life? Because a lot of times most pet parents I know, especially dog owners around here, they like, oh, they make their dogs wear shoes when they go out. They think like, oh, can't let the dog get dirty paws, you know. And especially with COVID, the last couple of years, the paranoia over germs is such
Yes.
that I've seen pet parents actually use disinfectant wipes to literally like clean their dogs, and wipe the mouth. And I'm like, whoa, don't do that, you know, don't do that. If you want to rinse with just water, that's fine, but don't put those chemical stuff, on. But that's what a lot of humans are translating in the COVID paranoia of home of, the germs onto their pet animals, and unwittingly you are increasing the toxic load
Yeah.
for for your dogs, and actually for yourself too in the long term. But we don't we're not conscious of all this. So that's what I like about the book. And they talk about the power of food. That's what I actually, at the end of the day, I think, for you and me, it's like, hey, food is medicine if you know how to use it right. Food can kill you, but food can heal you at the same time. It can make you
It's very
sick,
true.
it can make you better. So if you're more conscious and aware of that, you can actually, start making more conscious, wise choices for your animal, you know?
Yeah.
So
Uh, One sentence that is under the power of food. It says, understanding the power of food is essential to gaining better health and extending healthy life for you and your dog. It's the cornerstone of lifestyle medicine. And right below that, it says, food is information. See, we're not really taught that food is information.
yeah,
And I was having conversations with pet owners this past weekend, and talking about like we're not taught this unless you really go and seek out that information about nutrition. You're just gonna eat what you like and grab what you like, and grab the easiest thing that might be available and cost effective for yourself, for your pet. And we're never totally like told to our face when you get a dog that you know the power that nutrition and the power that food has, that it can heal and that it can harm. And now we're all starting to learn that ultra processed food isn't quite living up to its standard that we were kind of under the impression it had you know
yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the terms that's I think we've been hearing like a lot more now in the fresh feeding communities, functional food, you know, um, that like some pet parents like, hey, if you say my dog ancestrally was a scavenger, right? But how come we're feeding like mushroom, or like avocado oil, coconut oil, to our animals. And usually I'll have to explain to them like we're using these wholesome whole foods as functional foods to improve their life, their health, because a lot of pet parents, again, what this book does, if you read it more, it's like it looks behind the scenes in a way on how commercial pet food is created, and when you understand how modern day farming methods are done, especially like cattle, beef, right? Even for the human food industry, and the pet food industry, you will realize certain terms come up, like we mentioned in the previous chapter, like CAFO, you know, and
Factory
and
farmed animals.
yeah, factory farm animals, and the quality of how the animals are reared and then killed and
Yeah.
processed,
Yeah.
very important,
That's a whole
before,
rabbit hole for people who've never heard about it. There's a complete
yeah,
difference between like regenerative farmed animals and factory farmed animals. Completely different, and the nutrient profiles are different, which we're not taught unless you go seeking that information out as well, or listening to someone who's an
yeah,
expert in that area. It's crazy. The nutrient profile in a conventionally raised chicken is going to be completely different than a pasture raised chicken. Same for
mm,
cows.
yeah,
And then um, the fresh feeders are learning that and applying that to their animals as well and to their meals and what have you. But yeah, I think that's one of the other things that can seem kind of overwhelming when you start learning, the backside of the industry, how
yeah,
processed food is made and then how those ingredients are
yeah.
sourced.
I mean, like for me, the word nutrigenomics, like the first time I heard that, I was like, what the hell is that? You know? It's like I scratched my head like, oh my God. It's like I really felt I was going through this like rabbit hole, but this huge educational thing, like, what is how is our food procured, you know? And it this is the part where I think pet parents, if you make the effort to spend some time, and this book does it very well actually. I mean, it's a lot, but if you just even read like 10 minutes a day, just to get it into little
Yeah.
bite-sized, chunks for you to digest. There's so much information in this chapter alone that it's quite heavy, but it really reinforces the fact, like, the pet food industry, you know, the power they have, the influence they have uh, over the health of our animals, because food really is the number one important factor for health. Like, then after that, there's other factors, but if you for a modern day pet, if you just do focus really like as much as you can on the food, your chances of a healthy dog is much higher compared to feeding, say, a kibble diet,
Yeah,
you
for
know.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
So it's interesting, and with like what Rodney and Dr. Becker have been doing all these years, like really like fighting for like empowering and educating the public. I mean, like what Planet Pause in 2012. I mean, like that's how long ago it was. Not, I mean, like
Yeah.
you think about it, when Planet Pause, the Facebook page, they posted in 2012 an image and a list of all the ingredients found in a typical bag of commercial dog food. That alone gave like 500,000 shares overnight on Facebook. So that sort of tells you just like, wow, people had no fucking clue, man. They really didn't have a fucking clue about it.
Yeah, and the
Um,
one about rawhide, it says, and if for any pet parent watching this, listening to this, if you have not seen the video about rawhide, you might be one of the
um,
45 million that has already.
yep,
But
yep,
the one about rawhide, there's a post and there's a video about how rawhide is made, and I believe it was a video has garnered 45 million
yep.
views. It is, it's, I
Probably more
love the
than that by now.
I know. I love the way the video was done. As gross as it kind of is, and it's a very nice way of explaining like the really grossness of how rawhide is made that most people just do not know. And I love the way it was put together because it was cute enough to keep you entertained, and you're like, oh my god, this is so gross, but I still gotta keep watching it. You know.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
So Planet Paws, Rodney, I mean, like, I think he was like really like in terms of translating all this like science heavy, data heavy information. He has a gift, and
Yes.
bless him, he's so talented. He has this rare gift to actually translate everything that he reads in these medical journals. Because for those of you who don't know, he's actually a science nerd. So he absorbs all these things, and then he can translate it into something really into layman's language, but also visually.
Yes.
Because like on Facebook, he started to use like pictures and video, and if you have not seen any of his educational videos, I mean, that's how I started learning. Before this book was done, you
Yeah.
know, that's how I started to learn. It's through his viral videos, and Dr. Becker's articles as well. But really, his visual these videos that he has done over the years, and there's a huge repository of it. So just go and check it out. But you learn so much because I remember this rawhide thing. I shared it with my dog friends in Singapore, and they had no clue. They didn't know. Even to today, when I still share it today, you think it's so old, but I still share it, right? And they go like, "Really? Oh my God!" You know? Yuck! And it's like, oh shit, I just bought some for my dog, throw out. Milk bowl is that's the other one, throw out,
Yes. There they go.
Yeah, so for all you new pet parents, like really go to Planet Paws, his Facebook page. He's got a lot of videos. So if you want to share these things or understand them at a glance, that's very good because he has a
Yeah.
talent. He has a talent there.
Yeah, I like how they say too that there because so many video views and how Planet Pause has 3.5 million followers now, or by 2020 it was. I think he's close to 4 million now for the Planet Pause Facebook page. It. They're right when they say pet owners were desperate for guidance. You had those ones
Mm,
that kind of came along, and I certainly was one. I saw a post or come through my newsfeed or saw a video that when they came out, the early ones, you're just like, wait a minute, this is a cute, catchy video, but it's telling me something. But I'm
yeah,
like, well, I care about my dog and I care about my pet.
yeah,
This is information. So, like I said, if it's catchy enough to keep you watching it, then the video has done its job. And if you're open to the perspective of what it's telling you, but
yeah,
there's definitely there's because it kind of totally ballooned kind of so quickly so fast, it was just like everybody kind of either they found each other or they're just like they found their topic and they're just like, oh my God, like I knew this all along, but now he's like totally putting it out there that there's been raw feeders that have been around for like 20 years. We're just like, what do you mean you've been doing this for 20 years? And they have, and they're just like, and now information is coming more to light that yes, it is, there are bad things that happen in the pet food industry, and there's ways you can feed your dog fresh species appropriate food and totally work it out and be great at it. But
yeah,
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 there's been a definite hunger for
yeah.
more information
And
and more education.
and honestly, it's because of I would credit because of the way Rodney and Dr. Becker have been pushing so hard all these years, to promote these ideas that pet parents are hungry, as you said, and they're asking for change. Because
Yes.
the best way to change the industry is to vote with your dollar, right? So the pet food industry, who was so anti-raw, well, still is, but now you can actually see a slight change in the last couple of years where, they're starting to put out uh, hybrid diets, they will call it, or, they're trying to improve the quality of the food, or they're trying to market a new towards these pet
Yeah.
parents who are demanding a fresher diet,
Hmm.
more transparency, which is still an uphill battle, but it's moving there, so I would say the pet food industry is realizing that if we don't join it, it's they're
They're gonna miss the
gonna
boat. They're gonna miss the bus, and it's gonna carry on
yeah,
without them. So of course, you know, like these big industries, they want to be part of it and they see the demand because it's definitely customer demand driven, you know.
Yep.
If we are demanding things be more transparent or things be made better, then at some point the um, manufacturers have to do something to keep up with the demand of their clients and still make the billions of dollars that they're making.
Yeah.
So, and it talks in one part how they kind of, the book is educating the pet owner about minimally processed, partially processed, and ultra processed, and how the pet food industry has kind of hijacked some of the terms like naturally made or, you know, raw coated or what have you. They're kind of hijacking these terms that is legal for them to do, you know, but it's confusing and deceiving the customers even more because just because you see natural on the front of the bag or anywhere on the bag, really, is it really natural if it was made with corn gluten meal, which is a technically a natural substance, but you can't go to the store. You can't go to
Sorry,
the
that's my
store and
dog.
buy corn gluten meal. You can't go to the store and buy high fructose corn syrup. You know, if that's in your packaging, then how, you know, how natural is it? It's been denatured, it's been processed so much. You know, you can't buy chicken meal or meat meal at the store. You know, you've got an ultra processed diet if your food you're buying has been made with meals and corn syrups and ingredients that you can't get at the store yourself because some of them are only commercially available. So I like that it goes down into breaking down, you know, what to look for as far as types of food. Like I said, minimally processed to ultra processed. But yeah, it's still deceiving out there to the customer of how these industries and manufacturers and big companies are still trying to use their marketing tactics to kind of
Yeah.
persuade you and sway you into different directions and confuse you. And
Yeah.
at that point, when you get so confused, you just give up. You're just like, I need food. I'm going to take it. I'm going to go.
Yeah. I think what this book I love is that it, well, I don't know if it gently introduces you or it, you know, draws back the curtain for a lot of pet parents who never knew anything about big pet food companies and their tactics, their methods of, you know, how to get around selling poor quality animal feed grade food and label it as, you know, pet food, which should
Yeah.
be, you know, animal feed versus animal food. If we use our normal intellectual how we look at the word without playing with the definitions as what the pet food industry does with echo, you know, you'll realize that what majority of the things in the pet food aisle is pet feed, you know. And what I love is that this book really teaches you, or at least tells you what you should look out for when you next go you know, when you next go and buy food for your animal, you know, because of the demand of pet parents who wanted fresher food, and the big pet food industry wasn't doing it just yet. So you had a lot of these small family-owned entrepreneurs, right, who were basically pet parents themselves who wanted
Yeah.
better quality food. So they started, you know, making their own food, right? Fresh, raw, freeze dried, slow cook, whatever. But basically as minimally processed compared to commercial pet food, right? And that started a whole movement when the pet food industry started to sit up and go like, hey, how come these people are spending money with these like small mom and pop raw, you know, fresh food stores, right? And there is a practice which is not talked about where sometimes they buy over these companies, not to sell and promote the brand, but to bury it. It's exactly what Big Pharma does, you know, or anything to do that will help humanity. And if it goes across, if it doesn't promote the hungry, money grubbing, profit driven companies, they buy it and then they hide it. You know, they just keep the patents and then you never see light of day of it. You know,
Yeah.
so this is one of those dirty tactics that big pet food companies used to do a lot. I think still do, you know, but with the momentum that, you know, more conscious pet parents are asking for fresher food and more smaller businesses are starting up, you know, in different countries. Even in Singapore now, we have a lot more raw food companies now, very small, but you know, it was much better compared to say 10 years ago when there was only one company that brought in Dr. Billinghurst's bath, you know, from Australia, and that wasn't cheap, you know. But yeah, so it's like we even in Singapore, which is not as I would say uh advanced or more conscious compared to in the US in terms of, you know, mass population, right? Um, there is a growing awareness that, hey, there's this thing about fresh feeding, you know, and then table scraps. That's the other thing. We can feed table scraps. I said, yes, you can feed. So long as it's not, you know, cooked fats or cooked bones, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, your dog can eat the trimmings of your food, you know. But yeah, so I really like this chapter, you know, like you said, it talks about how do you break down what is ultra processed, processed, flash processed, you know, that kind of thing. And the other thing is it really mirrors what human doctors are telling us already. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when you see the doctor, especially a functional doctor, say like, eat less processed food, eat more fresh food. So
Yes.
actually, you know, unfortunately, vets are still behind, but there's a growing awareness now, even in um, the vets in around the world, where you know, hey, there's this thing about nutrition and fresh feeding and you know, diet. You know, a lot of them were never trained in vet school, but because there's this demand now there's more awareness, especially when there are more pet parents who go to the vet and say like, okay, how can I improve my dog's diet? Is there a better way? And then you will see that actually there are integrative vets, functional, you know, integrative vets, who have been doing it for years, like Dr. Becker, you know,
Lori
and
Kosher, Jody
yeah,
Gruenstern, I believe, Judy
yeah,
Morgan. There's several of them
yeah.
out there.
Yeah, so you know, I think this is an amazing, exciting time for the fresh feeding community because there's this growing momentum and awareness of all this. Like food is power, food is medicine.
It
Really, really
is.
like that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And even so, to kind of touch on that, because the book in this chapter it talked about how even if you do feed a fresh raw diet or you're doing DIY or you're trying it out for the first time and not quite sure, you think you might be on the right track, but you might not totally be on the right track. And I've heard stories and seen stories of how there are bad things that happen if you feed an unbalanced raw diet or you're not going by a recipe. And then that's what happens when vets kind of can get frustrated, and understandably so, because now you, the client, have gone in and you're just like, well, I'm feeding, you know, chicken, rice, and potatoes because, well, it's real food, but it's not a balanced real meal. And, you know, with the nutrition that veterinarians get in vet school, they don't spend, you know, decades learning about nutrition. They get taught how to take care of animals when they are sick. And there's been many vets that have also said, you know, Gary Becker says it all the time. You're like, they get a handful of hours of nutrition and that's it. They're more focused on, you know, recovering the problem instead of being proactive or learning how to be proactive in all the cases. So it can be very frustrating for vets, and I feel for them to be in that type of job. And you see a myriad of clients through the day, and you get some. You might end up with a dog that's deficient because the pet owner might not be feeding them the right way. So yes, it can be done wrong, but that's the kind of like shining star in all of this is there's so many opportunities to learn how to do it correctly, and that's what the book is teaching you, is how to do it correctly, how to, you know, look through all these marketing tactics with, you know, processed food, how it can be damaging to your dog as well, but what you can do to improve on it. And, you know, even if you don't discuss what you're feeding with what type of food you're feeding with your vet, there are ways to have, good conversations with them. There are stories where, vets totally are not on board, and maybe that's not the vet for you anymore. You might have to search around your area and find another one that you do agree with, because your vet needs to be your teammate. You don't want to go into the vet's office and have, knock down, drag out arguments. That's not fun for anybody, and then we've talked about stress and bringing that home, and now the dog is stressed out because you had an argument that day. But yeah, there's ways to go around it to be, kind and nice to your vets, to have calm conversations. If you don't agree, then you search out another one that is on your team and can help you with your dog to get properly nutrition. And we have all these resources. The book goes into further down in the book, but there are resources that people can use to, go by use recipes, free recipes, recipes you can purchase. There's all kinds of places to learn how to do it right. And that's why, again, it's so great to have such a physical copy of the book to learn all these tips and tricks. But yeah, the goal is to not to get into arguments with your veterinarian about what types of food you're feeding, and to do it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, like because I don't drive, I don't own a car, but I'm very lucky that I've got technically two vet clinics within walking distance in my neighborhood. Um, the first one I went, I liked the vet, but it was a very conventional vet. The second one that I went to, especially when I started my rescue work, they offered TCM, which was a plus, but they weren't, I mean, like, they are still very conventionally trained, the mindset, and they're slowly changing. But I remember when I first started and I told them, like, oh, I'm feeding my dog raw. I never hid the fact that I was feeding my dog raw. And they were like, oh, okay, and usually, like, the most common is like, oh, isn't it expensive? Like, the vet would actually ask me, isn't it expensive? But she cooks for her dog, her own dog, but she cooks for her dog, like, rice, meat, the typical. But I said, actually, not really. If you know how to budget and source for stuff, you don't have to. But what I love about this book so much, and I actually highly recommend this to all pet parents out there listening, is that buy two copies at least, one for yourself and one for your vet. Because that's what I did. I gave this book, The Forever Dog, and Dr. Connor Brady's Feeding Dogs Raw to my vet clinic. I know that they're not like, say, like super pro raw and ditch the commercial pet food, but in the last couple of years, I realized, because of COVID, and when I went like recently, it's like they had a freezer selling raw food for dogs at the main branch, and I was shocked, and I was like, oh fuck, that's so fucking amazing, man. like wow, I was so happy, and to me it's a sign, because I honestly think the more pet parents come forward to actually at least have an honest conversation with your vet, like, hey, I'm feeding my dog a fresh food diet. It doesn't have to be raw, but a fresh food diet, when they realize that there are actually more pet parents doing that, there's more demand for it, then they'll be more inclined to, hey, this might be a business opportunity to look into, to help not just serve our pet parents that we're serving at the clinic, but also to improve business, right? The profit margin in that sense, because you're selling what pet parents want.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I was super happy when I saw that chest of raw food,
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's really come a long way, because I've been with this vet clinic for more than 10 years. So the change is happening, the change is happening slowly but surely. So, I like I said, get two copies of this book and give it to your vet. Even if they're like hardcore opposed to it, but just give it to them and say, here, this is science backed, it's written, it's got all these papers. And what I love about this chapter is that, because they actually noted that one of the most interesting and recurring experiences they had while interviewing some of the world's top longevity experts has been their notable responses when they connected the dots on the subject. So, when they interview these longevity experts, and then they say like, okay, so putting this in context to your pet dog, for instance, you know, um, what do you think? How do you feel about feeding fresh food as opposed to commercial pet food? And suddenly they sort of hit light bulb moment for them, as some of them, said, oh my God, this applies to my pet as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for humans, right? So this was something for me. It was like a win, a real win, because it's like it's such common sense to some of us, but not to everyone. It's when slowly, like, okay, we talk about eating fresh food for humans. Can't we apply it to our pet dogs and cats as well? You know, um, they need to eat a species appropriate diet to have a long life, a healthy life. Lifespan
It
equals
kind of,
healthspan.
yeah, that brings up a thought to me, kind of thinking about it. And I've always wanted to ask, next time I go to my local zoo, I want to ask like the people that work there, because if you think about it, people who do work at any type of zoo, or aquarium, they know what turtles eat. They know what their sharks need to eat. They know what their giraffes need to eat. They know what their lions and tigers need to eat, or their zebras, or what have you. I know at my local zoo, like they have a building towards the back where you can kind of see like the hospital section, and you can kind of see the kitchen section. And you can see where all the food is. You could actually watch them, chopping up food for the animals for the day. They're chopping up real food. They've got carrots and broccoli and kale, your greens, your meats for the big cats and all that stuff. And what I want to know is, for the zookeepers who take care of those big animals, who know what those big animals need to eat to survive, just as if they were in the wild, does that zookeeper person have a dog or cat at home, and what are they feeding the dog and cat? That would
Mm,
be interesting topic to add, because you think if you're working in the animal field, that the person who takes care of the giraffes or the zebras might also feed their dog appropriately. That's one thing I want to find out. That always comes to my mind. It's just like, and
yeah,
then like you said with the experts, it's like it doesn't, sometimes the light bulb doesn't kind of go off in that aspect. And they're just like,
yeah,
whoa. When Karen and Rodney actually talk to them, they're just like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Okay,
yeah. Oh shit. Oh my God. Suddenly they go like, I'm killing my animal. I'm eating better than. But I actually did interview with Big Cat Rescue founder Carol Baskin in Florida, US,
Oh,
and
wow.
she actually told me that at one point they did try to feed commercial pet food, or like kibble kind of diet, because it was being marketed to them. It's like
Mm,
try and feed the cats that
yeah.
as an alternative, but they realized that it was the wrong thing very quickly. So that's why they only feed basically a prey raw food diet for those cats. And even though those cats captive, what's the word, rescues, from the what do you call it, the illegal cat trafficking.
Oh, yeah,
um
yeah, yeah. Like a sanctuary type where they put them, where they
yeah,
get
yeah,
rid of
because
them.
they cannot be rehabilitated to the wild, because
Right.
basically they've been so basically these animals are so fucked up, treated, to the point that they will not be able to survive in the wild. So those cats at Big Cat Rescue are basically the ones that can't be released. So it's a sanctuary for these, basically poor animals who just can't be released out. But they design the sanctuary in such a way that it provides a lot of environmental enrichment for these giant, beautiful cats. I mean, we're talking about not just my kitty cat at home, but these huge, beautiful exotic cats. And they really like design the place where they make runs and tunnels around the property, so that the cats can move from one area to another. So they rotate. So they sort of migrate around, and even like like giving like fun things for the animals to play with, like say pumpkin stuffed with food, or or even like
Yeah.
cardboard boxes, like typical kitty cat thing. Give a cat a box. It doesn't matter whether it's a tiger, a lion, okay, a puma, or your domestic little tabby cat. They all go into the damn box. They love the cardboard box. You don't have to spend a lot of money on expensive cat beds. That's one thing I've learned through experience. All you have to do is just give them a box, and they'll try to squeeze their bodies inside. The smaller the box, the harder they squeeze. We have in Japan, there is this cat called Maru, Maru, and he's like a celebrity cat where the Japanese daddy will give him boxes of different sizes, even when it's tiny, tiny. And he's a big fat cat because, well, his diet is something of a little concern to me. But anyway, he just keeps squeezing himself into a box. So if you ever want to have some cat therapy when you're tired of work, go to YouTube and Google for Maru the cat. I think Maru now has a new sidekick, a second cat there. So I can't remember. My friend is really into Maru, so he tells me about it. But yeah, so sidetrack there, everybody. But yes, the main point is what, yeah, even Big Cat Rescue realized that they can't feed processed food. It screws up the microbiome, the health of the animal, big time.
Yeah. That was definitely one thing that just came to mind. I remember I thought about it years ago, and it kind of like goes in and out. But it's just like, yeah, if especially like you go on field trips to the zoo as a kid, usually, most of us that live, in the major cities, I grew up going to the zoo as a kid with schools and my grandma and all that stuff. And you're taught, like, as a kid, from zookeepers, this is what like I said, this is what the giraffe eats, this is what the zebra eats, this is what the mongoose eats, this is what the red pandas, every animal you can pretty much think of, they tell you like what they eat. But then we go home and we feed our dogs and cats, these processed brown balls, and we don't even think twice about it until like I said, I hate to repeat myself, the light bulb, but there's so many light bulb moments that just happen. You're like, oh my god, how did I not put these two things
I
together?
know, I
But that's
know.
what I love,
Yeah.
again, how this book just like breaks it all down for you, and it's like you're gonna be mind blown, absolutely mind blown when it just clicks.
Yeah, and again, what I love about this book is they keep, trying to reassure the reader. I know it's a lot of information to process. Please don't be overwhelmed, but you can start with little, little tiny steps. And one of the things that they mention in this chapter, which they go into much more detail later on, is CLTs, or core longevity toppers, of, how you can just add a little bit of fresh to even your current commercial, dry food diet, or whatever you're feeding, processed diet, to freshen up the bowl, to slowly start, making incremental changes. And again, the idea is that even when you just change 20%, take out 20% processed and add 20% fresh, you really reduce the incidence of cancer for your animal. I mean, like, can you imagine just 20%, just adding some, chopped veggies, or, like the spoiled tops of the carrots or the celery, throwing it in there, um, it does miracles. That's why I love my dog. I call him my garbage compactor, because for most people who don't know, I've got like 12 cats and one dog, and there's the human as well, which doesn't count really. But whatever leftovers, so long as it's safe to give my dog, she finishes it. I mean, like, I hate to say it, sometimes when my dog, well, when my cats like eat too fast and they throw up very quickly, my dog is zoom, first one there to whip it up and lick it up, And I know pet parents, especially in Asia, who are very clean freaks, right? They're like, don't eat that, you're gonna die, but like, hey, it's basically a lot of digestive acid in there. But the dog's stomach has a high what do you call it? Low pH? Is that what it is? Or high acidity level.
Yeah.
So I can't remember my pH scale. Higher number is more alkaline, is it? lower is acidic. Okay, I fail in that, so don't take my word for it. But basically, cats and dogs have a higher acidity level in their gut, you know, and that's why, I mean, in very simple ways that they can eat a lot of crap, you know, day old food that we can't,
Mm-hmm.
because they can actually process all that. Like salmonella would not kill them because they actually have naturally occurring salmonella in their stomach as well. No big deal. One thing I remember, Dr. Ian Billinghurst, when I interviewed him, he actually also, when he gives his talks as well, and he shows like slides, right? One of the slides he shows people is um, the dog licking its butt, the dog drinking out of the toilet bowl, and then running around. And it's like, yep. And you know what comes out of the dog's butt, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
basically shit. And they do eat other, shit. Like sometimes other dogs poop, or like for my dog, sometimes he will look for my cat's poop in the litter box sometimes. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit icky for us human beings. But usually it tells me that, okay, I need to pay a bit more attention to her stomach because she's craving something that
Yes.
I have I have missed out in her usual food. So like, okay, I might have to add a bit more, maybe like more fermented vegetables, or more berries, or up her digestive enzymes or her probiotics. So that's usually a sign for me, because when I am more conscious and diligent in my feeding for her, because I don't feed a balanced diet every day, but I do a, what's the word? I balance it over time.
Mm-hmm.
So, like one night she will have a chicken carcass, a whole chicken carcass, and that's it. You know, um, some nights she might just have like a pig trotter, you know, that kind of thing. Other nights she might have a whole mackerel fish as her meal. Then some nights is I will mix it with the commercial raw food that I buy, because obviously it's easy, but then I might add in my own veg blends, berries, or whatever in, and whatever supplements to give her. So it's like, yeah, dogs much better than cats in a way, because they biologically evolved to go into starvation mode. Because as the book said, they were not very good hunters all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike cats, who are pretty good hunters, dogs don't always get their food, so they do go hungry for a couple of days before they get their next kill. So, and they mention in this book, wasn't it, Dr. Seafried from Boston College, and he talked about this one very old experiment that scientists did,
Yeah.
and what was the dog's name? Do you remember?
I don't remember the
Rocco,
dog's name.
Rocky? Was it
I
Rocky,
remember
Rocco, or
this
something?
study. I
But
know exactly what you're talking about. It was a couple pages back, I think, that
yeah,
I'm
and
on.
and basically it's not done now, but it was a very now it's considered unethical, but they starved this farm dog. Okay, it was a working farm dog, and they starved it for 100 days,
Yeah.
right? And when they decided, like, oh my God, 100 days is okay, too much, I think we're gonna stop. And the dog went back, and it basically he still had the energy to jump over the fence or something, right?
His
And
name was Oscar. Oscar.
Oscar, that's right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, Oscar. So he shares the story, Dr. Seafried, and it reinforces the thing again, that our dogs, healthy dogs, not sick dogs, but healthy dogs, can survive without food for quite a while. You know, they might not look visually appealing to what we are comfortable looking at, what we think is normal or acceptable, body weight and condition. But yes, they can actually, as the experiment showed, survive even 100 days and beyond without food. So that was something that also hit me.
Yeah, and that actually in a weird way, I actually saw a friend of mine post about a dog that her son and had picked up. I don't know what kind of dog it was. I just knew it was a short-haired, kind of medium-sized dog. The dog they found, I guess, was on the side of the road. They decided to do the right thing and pick the dog up. No sign of, anywhere the dog belonged to. Picture of the dog, he was emaciated. And you see stories like that, every so often where people find, a dog has probably been lost, wandering around, fending it for itself. You have no idea how long the dog's gone without food, but he's obviously emaciated. Does he need medical attention? Yes. Does he need food? Yes. But that dog has lasted a while, depending on how much weight he had before he ended up, wandering off from where he lived, and I've seen it with horses too. There's a friend of mine down in South Carolina that had rescued a horse couple, I think it was last year maybe, and, completely emaciated. And how long did that horse live? How long was it in that condition before someone came in and rescued it? So can they still survive for a long time without food? They can't. Obviously, nobody wants emaciation for their pets, but it does show you they can live for quite a while. Are they in pain? Do they need medical attention? Yes, they do. they need help desperately bad, but they will live a long time without food. And there's a healthy, limit to go without food where you induce apoptosis and autophagy, and it's very beneficial. But then if you go past that point to emaciation and you see rib bones, then yes, that is, the body starting to degrade rapidly. So there's obviously a line in the sand there, but yes, they can go without food for quite some time. It sounds horrible. The dog went for 100 days without food. You're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
It's even, they say, it's a crappy study. It's hard to hear, but the animal can do it. We ourselves can go for a while without food. It's good for your body to stop intaking food and let it clean house. And when I learned, about, that feeding window or not eating as much as we think we should, there was one of my past jobs or any job you have really, but I related to a past job I had working warehouse where it's just like you work for so many hours and then you have to stop. You have to clean up that mess you've made throughout the day. Your body's the same way. Our dog's bodies are the same way. If they're constantly eating all day long, when do you turn off the intake machine for the the little cleaner helpers of your body to go through and just like, okay, we got to clean up all this stuff that's happened all day long and kind of and reset and give everything some time to like calm down. And we go to sleep at night, your dog goes to sleep at night. They need that time to rest. What does Karen Becker say all the time? Rest, repair, and restore. We forget about that because standard American diet and standard American living, and I'm sure it's true for not every country but several countries. It's just like we see the food and we see the fast food and we see all the yummy delicious stuff, we want to eat it. But back on that topic of not eating all the time and trying to let the body do what it's designed to do, it's okay to go without food for a little while. So it takes an adjustment period to kind of experience it, but in the long run, it's okay.
Yeah. So, basically now the question is like, okay, like, all right, so this book is talking about, okay, like food, nutrition. So, what is the so-called best practices for feeding your dog? And they talk about the 2 T's, type and timing. So what type of nutrients are ideal and when should meals be timed throughout the day, right? So this is something that I think for a lot of pet parents is like, again, something new, because it's like, oh, okay, first you tell me like, oh, my dog can go without food for a few days. Now you're telling me like there's an ideal timing, like, huh? Um, yes. And what type of food should I feed to, optimize their diet, basically, So what I like about this food, again, it really educates you about, the percentages of like protein and fat, versus carbohydrates. Again, it talks about modern day agriculture, big food business, and actually big pet food industry as well. And basically, again, it sort of talks about the ancestral dog's DNA. They're not really, they don't have that saliva, what do you call it? Saliva enzymes.
Amylase?
Yeah,
the salivary
amylase.
amylase.
Yeah, big word for easy. To break down carbohydrates, naturally. So it's like a lot of pet parents like, oh, but I I feed my dog rice and, whatever, it's fine. And pet food is basically corn, right? Maize, um, wheat, uh, you know, but the thing is, they can eat it over time, but it doesn't mean that it's healthy for them long term because their body isn't meant to eat a lot of that. After a while, you sort of screw up their pancreas, and then you get all sorts of problems. That's where the thing with the kibble diet, pancreatitis comes in, diabetes, obesity, for your dog, inflammation, that sort of, this book for me sort of slowly teaches you, like really the kibble diet, because it's rich in carbohydrates, it triggers a lot of insults, health insults to your pet, you know. So yeah, that's what I like about it.
Yeah. And to reiterate, and I'm sure I've said this before, but I'll say it again, and it says it in this book clear as day. And for anybody listening or reading, it is on page 115. It says a dog's carbohydrate requirement is 0. They have 0 requirement, which means they do not need it to live. And we've almost like forced our dogs to adapt to that. Can they live with carbohydrates? Yeah, they've learned how to process them and survive, And when you do the carb equation math, which is a whole short little math equation, I think we did that. Did we do that last week? We did something with a carb,
Age.
or it was
No,
the
we did
ages.
the
Okay, I
age.
was like, I knew we had the calculator out, but it was the age.
Yeah, we should do that for the carbs.
So yeah, with the carb equation, it's pretty easy: protein, fat, fiber, moisture, and ash. The book goes into how to get that. You subtract it from 100, and you'll start to find out that a lot of ultra processed food in your kibble pellets have anywhere from 40 to 60% carbs and sugars. And then when you read the ingredient panels, you're like, oh hey, that's sugar and that sugar and that sugar and that sugar. So you do the math first to kind of figure out what is in that bag you're feeding. Again, it's you take 100 and you add up the protein content, the fat content, the fiber content, the moisture, and the ash. If ash is not listed, it's usually around 6 or 7%. But you do the math, you add those all up, you subtract it from 100, and there you go. And that is not clearly listed on the packaging of the food because guess what? The manufacturers do not want you to know.
Yep. And again, there is a really good video that Rodney did on this one. How to calculate. Go and look for it. It first time I found out about this little equation, and then I started taking all my bags, and I was like, holy shit, that's so much, that's wrong, that's so wrong, And the thing is, right, in the human food nutrition world, um, basically it's the same thing. When you eat too much carbs and sugar, you're going to have all sorts of health issues, right? And sadly, because of the way, again, agriculture and the food manufacturing is done, the politics is done, is that they because of profit, they like to use refined grains or flour, whatever you want to call it. They the quality of the ingredients that they churn out to sell, even for food byproducts, is very poor, very, very poor. So it's highly refined and lots of sugar, and it causes humans health issues. When you do this calculation and you look at your dog's diet, what you're feeding it, you realize it's exactly the same thing. So again, that was a light bulb moment for us.
Yeah, I remember the first time I learned about that. I did the same thing. I was going, through different products of food. I'm like, okay, what did I used to feed and how much was in there? Or friends would ask me questions, be like, hey, what's a good food? You seem to know about this. I'm just like, what are you feeding or what are you looking at? And I would do the carb math. I'm just like, yeah, no, too much sugar. Pick something else.
Yeah.
But of course, I explained it to them. I was like, well, you add this and that, and, you get a bit of you're looking about 50% sugar or 47% or maybe 63%, whatever they were asking me to kind of look up for them or help them out with. But I'm just like, yeah,
Yeah.
you might want to not go down that route and try to find something else that's a little less sugary and carby.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so thankful and grateful that you took the time to listen to this podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could subscribe, download, rate, review, and share this with others whom you care about that may enjoy it as well. Thank you, and remember to be kind to yourself and others. Have a awesome day, everyone.